Everyone loves to receive a card on their birthday or maybe at Christmas, but it's even better when it really surprises you. A couple that I've received from my family in the past are really darling. Now this one, there we go, is, you can see it pops up to begin with, and then it actually utilises a little LED for the Christmas tree. How sweet is that? And this one is one of my favourites because it not only pops up and it's really beautiful, but it actually utilises a bought-in component, which is a little music box.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
So in this video, I'm going to show you how to make a really fun gift card. Now I'm going to do it from scratch from Illustrator, but you can also access my template if you wish. So you can see it's right here, and it has a little LED in it and a mechanical action, there we go, for a little fun quality. So let's get going.
So let's start by opening a new document. I want it A4, I like to have mine in landscape so I have a bit more space. We can name it as well if we choose. And then I'm going to find and bring in some reference material for this classic instant camera. So I'm going to copy and bring it in, but I can't right click paste. It's one of Illustrator's quirks, so I need to go to edit paste or Control V. I'm going to move it over to one side and use a rounded rectangle tool to create a rectangle shape for my vector camera. Now off screen I have my card mock-up that I'm referencing and I'm making sure it's the right size. And now I'm going to use the eyedropper tool. So I want to sample the colour. I don't want it to look too dark and dingy, I want a nice bright cream colour. There we go. And then now I just make my reference material about the same size so I can get more shapes better. Now I'm going to use the ellipse tool and pressing shift to make a perfect circle, and I'm going to bring it across, and I'm going to use the eyedropper tool again to sample the black colour so I don't have to guess and make it more authentic. Now essentially from here what I do is create a number of ellipses, a number of circles, and I sample the colour in each instance and I'm overlaying them to give this lens effect. I end up resizing the larger one, so it's not necessarily exactly the same size as the original, but that's to make sure it fits my reference material. So with my lens complete, now I want to actually make it look like it's glass. So I'm going to use the flare tool. So if we just click in and then you drag out, it creates a really cool flare effect. Now obviously this is supposed to give a flare effect for cameras, as if you're taking a photo, but actually over the top of this it makes it look like it's sort of catching the light at a distance and making it look like glass. It really brings it to life. To make it look a little bit more authentic as well, I want to make it look ever so slightly 3D, so I just drop behind a similar shape and then just stretch out to match. Now I'm going to create the flash in the corner. So again with my rounded rectangle, I end up making it a fair bit smaller than the original, so it doesn't look too compact. And just checking the distance to make sure it's nice and proportioned. And with another square in the middle, and this is where my LED will shine out. So I want to indicate to my maker that it needs to be cut out. And then I'm going to create my little button by just duplicating the original ellipse and just shifting things around just to make sure everything fits and has a nice 3D effect. Cool, so now I want to just put in this 1000 design, and I'm looking through my fonts, but there isn't one I like, so instead I'm going to install my own. I spent quite a long time actually searching through a selection of fonts on defont.com until I found one which I thought would be fine. It's not actually quite the same as the existing one from my reference material, but it will suffice, be good enough. So we can just bring it in and then scale it up to fit inside my little box. And now I'm going to employ the use of the eyedropper tool once again. So I'm making sure that the colours are all the same. And here I decided that I have the button on the right hand side, so I wanted it in green. And now down at the bottom I'm using the rounded rectangle tool to create the base shapes, and I actually ended up creating a third as well. And then for our rainbow, just duplicating a number of lines and then the eyedropper tool again to sample the colours. And then I can group them, narrow them, and then arrange them and send them behind the objects that I've already made. Now I need to have the little cutout where the photo is going to pop out. I didn't make it the full length because I want to make sure it's going to be the right size to accommodate the shape. And then I'm just bringing in the name for my instant camera, trying to make it look again similar to the reference material. And I'm just looking for a really simple font this time, nothing fancy at all. Okay, so next I am creating the instant camera picture. That is such a classic shape and look. So it takes me a little while to play with it. I actually ended up going back and editing a fair bit of this later to make sure the sizing was correct, because this was my first iteration. And I'm using the pen tool here to create the shape that I need for the extension, which will join to the linkage later on. And just grouping everything together. Then I'm going to use the ellipse tool to create a little circle to indicate where it needs to for the split pin to go through. And I'm just rotating it to make sure everything fits on the page, ready for the background. So now I'm bringing in another rectangle, rounded rectangle tool, and this is to lay out all the mechanisms and the electronics that are going to be behind my camera. So of course it needs to be a little bit smaller, so I'm just trying to gauge it for size and centering it, and then I make it a fraction different size using the ruler tool. Now I have particular dimensions from my card mock-up that I have off screen, which I'm referencing, and I have to make sure that it's to the nearest millimetre. So I use the ruler tool on the left hand side to try and make sure that everything is exactly where it should be. And then I'm going to bring in the legs for my LED and create a little shape for the button cell. So I'm creating the sort of flap part for my button cell in order to keep the copper tape in place and make the circuit. And I'm using some simple orange rectangles to indicate that the copper tape should be laid out there. And overlaying things, laying things out, and utilising the spaces as efficiently as I can, because it obviously is quite a small area to work in. And just making sure that things are in line, and that will be used for the cutout with my linkages. I've got my pluses and minuses, of course, to indicate the polarity. And then I'm creating a little linkage bridge, which is going to be the support for the step 3 linkage, which is indicated with the dashed line, and using the ellipse to create the area for the split pin to go through for the fixed pivot, and some grey things for the tabs. So for the background I picked this really cute rainbow glittery design, and I bring it in, and it's very large indeed, so Control minus to zoom out. And I want it to be a bit larger than the A4 sheet, because I'm going to create a rectangle which is going to be A5 dimension, 148 by 210, and then I'm going to use the clipping mask to cut out the shape that I need, which is going to be exactly the right size. Send it to back so it's behind everything, and zoom in. Now I went ahead and took the liberty of just creating my shape, and this is the instructions, the different steps for the to how to use the card so that my customer is really clear. Now I pick a font here. I actually went back and installed another font later on, but I am just using the eyedropper tool to sample the colours from the rainbows, so it's really cute. And for the linkage page, I'm going to bring in the flat part for my electronics to make the circuit, and now I need to create the linkages. So again, I'm using some rounded rectangles. I'm sampling the ellipse from the previous page so I don't have to duplicate that, and I need to make sure that the alignment is perfect for each split pin. So again, my mock-up in card, that's off camera, I'm measuring and I'm going back and then I'm using the ruler tool in Illustrator to make sure that it is as close as I can realistically get it. And I'm just duplicating, trying to save myself some time, and moving my split pin points once again. And I've got the part which is going to be used for the tab, so you're going to be able to hold onto it. And now I'm looking for another resource, this silly little monkey face. I also created the water mug off camera, and now I'm just duplicating input into my page.
To make this gift card, going to need the A4 part and the A5 linkage section. Going to need a craft knife with a metal ruler and a self-healing cutting mat. You might want to have access to a folding bone for one or two parts. Some sharp scissors, alternatively to a craft knife, will obviously suffice, and we'll want something to make some little holes. So either an awl of some kind, or the tip of a very sharp fine pair of scissors, as long as we're very careful. We're also going to need some foam double-sided tabs or tape, some split pins, butterfly pins. We have one small flat LED and a button cell battery, as well as a length of copper tape. You will also need some double-sided sticky tape and or a glue stick and some kind of regular tape, masking tape or sellotape. So the first thing we're going to do is cut the large background section out of the A4 section. So let's grab a craft knife and a steel rule. Now with the craft knives, you want to make sure that you are pressing up until you are exposing just the amount of the blade that you need. If it's fairly thin material, you won't need it up very high. If you've got thick material like corrugated board, then a fair bit longer. Then you need to make sure that you have locked it. Now most are self-locking, but some have the little pull down tab here. When we hold it, we need to make sure that we put the base into the center of our palm, and then our index finger, that's our pointer finger, goes over the top so that it's an extension of our arm, and we're going to draw it backwards, make sure we have lots of pressure. We don't use it like a pen because we cannot get anywhere near enough control and it's not safe. So in, index finger, over the top, ready to go. So we use our steel rule, and this one has a little ridge across the top to keep my fingers nice and clear. Pressing down up against the edge. There we go, all the way out. Takes a good bit of effort. So that's one side done, let's do the others. Okay, so now that the back section is done, now I cut out these parts that I need. Now this time what I'm going to do, because we have little curves on the edges, I'm not going to try and do that with my craft knife. Curves are always best done with a pair of scissors, always, always. So I'm going to just cut it straight, and then I'm going to cut off the corners with my scissors. Now that I have cut that straight, I'm just going to cut off the white corners with a pair of scissors. when we use our scissors, make sure that we're cutting with the back of them because the tip is not very strong at all. And we keep the scissors just static and we move the card in towards the scissors. And we also need to cut out the section of the bottom for our photo and in the corner here to have our LED shine out. And then let's have a go at cutting this out as well, also with our craft knife. Okay, and let's do the same for these pieces. Now, because the linkages are curved and they're fairly short, I'm actually going to cut those out just with a pair of scissors, but for the straight edges, still using the craft knife. For this piece, we want to bend it down the middle. Now, you could just press it across, it's not too bad. If you want to do it properly, then you could use a folding bone, whatever you have access to. So just pop the ruler across, and just like with a craft knife, except now we're using a folding bone, just pressing down the center. And then it will take a crease much more easily. There we go, and we can just press on both sides. Now, these pictures, I've included a couple of different alternatives for our little magic instant camera picture that comes out. Of course, you could actually put a nice picture of a close friend, perhaps it's their birthday, might put a nice picture of them. But if you want to make it a bit funny, for a bit of a laugh, then you could use one of the ones that I've given you. So I'm going to do what a mug. So now I can either use my glue stick or I could use some double-sided sticky tape, doesn't really matter which, and I'm going to stick it onto here. And just make sure that it's facing this way, so this is the top. So back on our main part, we're going to do the electronics. So the very first thing that I need to do is to take my little tab, which I've bent, and we need to stick it into place. So this bit goes over the top to line the two up together. There we go. Now it's ready to receive the copper tape. Now I will say, just so that you don't get confused, I would recommend if you turn this over, you can see it's now blank because obviously we can't print on the back, but what you want to do is just draw a line that extends all the way across. The idea is that the copper tape's going to come down, it's going to come across here, and then when we open it up and it will continue onto here as well. So if we extend that line out, that will just help remind us. We're going to start by doing the short section here. So we should have a length of copper tape and we want to be sparing with it and careful. It tends to curl up on itself, so please follow the next tip. So I'm going to approximate for how much I need. Let's just go around the corner. I'll need about that much. We're going to peel off the sticky back side, but don't peel it all off at once. Okay, just peel off a little bit to expose the end. So make sure that you keep the paper backing on it. It will roll up on itself, it will stick to itself, and you will not be able to use it. Okay, so now that we've just got the end exposed, I'm going to lay it down over the area that I've marked for you. And as you stick it down, you can just draw the paper backing backwards. When we get to the corner, it's a little bit tricky. So what we're going to do is just press it down with our fingernails. We're going to draw it backwards so that the sticky edge is now running alongside the side that we want to head towards. And then we go back on ourselves, like so. So it's actually in the corner, it's stuck to itself. Then we're going to press it down right up into there, extend it out, making sure that pressing it down with our nail as we go, and then perfect, look at that. So now let's have a go doing this longer edge now that we've had a practice. So just as before, we're going to start peeling off the paper backing, but just exposing the amount that we need. It really does help to have nails here. I'm going to start by laying it down and drawing it outwards. Now when we get to a corner, I want to take it slightly further, cross the angle so that the sticky side is now lying along where we want it to go. Pick up the entire length, fold it over itself, press it down with our nail, pulling the paper backing off as we go. Press, 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 press. And now we have another corner. So same thing again, comes off on 45 degrees, press it down on top of itself, use your nail, give it some guidance. Mine has torn off, that's unfortunate, but it's okay, it will still conduct electricity. So let's lay it down, just make sure we've got a really good connection. And then over the top, following our arrow, we bring it over the top, and make sure we're pressing it down with our nail as we go. Perfect. Okay, before we set everything up, I want to test my LED and make sure that if there's any issues, I know that it's with my connection and not with my LED. I know that the longer leg of the LED is the positive, okay? The shorter leg is the negative. So I'm going to take my LED, I'm going to flip this over. Now, if you can see there we go. So this is the positive side. So I'm going to take the positive leg, the longer leg, I'm going to pop it over the two sides, press it down with my fingers, and the light should come on. So now that I know that my LED is working, I can pop it into place. So I need to make sure that I have the positive leg, so the long leg, coming up this way. So I'm going to bend it out at about a 45 degree just to try and match this, and I want the short leg, the negative leg, lining up with the negative side. So I'm going to pop this down so that that bit's in the square and this all matches. There we go. So I have a little length of masking tape here. I'm going to put it over the leg, over one leg. I'm going to come up next to it like that, use my fingernail or a sharp tool just to really try and encourage it to sit flat and stay on there. If there's a gap, it might work itself loose. And the same on the other side. Okay, let's test the circuit again. So this is the positive side. I want it facing this side. So I'm going to flip it over so it sits like this. And if I close my circuit and make my circuit, the light should come on. So I went back in and had a little look at why my LED wasn't working, and I realised that just here, it is now, that just here on the edge, it had actually torn. So you do need to make sure that you are really careful. Also, where I had stuck it to itself in the corner because it tore in the first place, you do need to make sure you have a little tuck underneath, because otherwise you risk the insulating quality of the sticky back plastic from stopping the movement of the electrical flow along the copper tape. The next thing we need to do is to actually stop the battery from falling out. So, and we're also going to be able to protect it and stop the circuit from constantly being made with the LED turning on all the time. So what we're going to use is either some foam tape or some foam pads, just like this one. Now these we're going to cut down, and we just want little strips. So this is actually kind of an ideal length, so I'm just going to approximate for how wide I need it to be and just cut it with a good pair of scissors. You can peel off one side of it, stick it down. There we go. And now that's not quite deep enough because our cell is actually comparative size to the foam pad, so we're going to need 2. So I'm going to peel off one sticky side again and then stick it right on top, like so. I'm going to need one along the bottom and stick that on top. There we go. Now, of course, the card's not going to quite reach, but that's absolutely fine. You can just give it some encouragement and just bend it a little bit further, so that you need to give it a fair, firm press in order to turn the LED on. I'm also going to add a little strip across the top, just in case the battery should fall out if we were to turn it upside down. So next we're going to assemble our linkage parts, ready for the picture to pop out of the bottom. So the first thing that I need to do is to make some holes ready to receive our split pins. So I'm going to grab myself an awl, AWL awl, or else the end of a very sharp pair of scissors, but obviously be very, very careful indeed. You'll want to have something to press onto, really, like a piece of plasticine or an eraser. You could even just use one of the foam pads that we're going to use for the bottom here. So I'm just going to poke through, poke, there we go, and then just open the hole a little bit, and the same for the others. Now we want the split pins to be able to fit comfortably into the holes, so pop one in and twist it around so that it can move freely, and do that for each of the holes as well. Okay, here we go. So how this is going to work is this will come down here, this is going to be up here, there we go, it's ready to fit. Here's our little bridge, and then this part is going to connect the two like so. So we have our floating pivots between our linkage parts, and we have our fixed pivot, which in this case is just going to attach to our base card. So it's easier to affix your floating pivots first of all, so let's attach this one in here. There we go, we've just split the legs like so, so it fits on comfortably, and just make sure that the linkage can move. And then we'll do the same for this one. So 2 go together, split pin goes through, place down the legs, make sure that it can move freely. Now we want to fix the fixed pivot. So this one's going to go through all the way to the back of the card, split the legs apart, there we go, and make sure that that can move freely as well. Now we need to make a little bridge for this linkage up here. So we're going to place it over the top, and we're going to put some tape down to make sure that it's nice and restricted, and making sure it doesn't come into the coloured zone. So I've grabbed a thin piece of tape with a nice straight edge. I'm going to place it as close as I can to the linkage side without it touching. I'm going to press it down, use my nail to really get it in there. And I've got a nice thin piece of tape for this edge over here because we haven't got a lot of space to work with. There we go. So we want it to be right up against the edge of the linkage without touching it so that it can move nice and freely. Look at that. So the last thing to do before we fully assemble it is we're going to pop some tabs down in these places to make sure that everything's lifted up off the surface to allow lots of space for our split pins and also for around our battery. So I'm going to cut them roughly down to size. Now I'm going to build up 2 layers worth so that it can accommodate the depth of the split pins. Now we're going to make sure that we can do a dry run before we commit to sticking everything down. So let's check that everything works. Pop my battery in there. There we go. Now this is just going to pop through here. It won't come out very far, because that's the idea. Then we want to make sure we're going to line it up with the LED so it can show through. And this should be all the way back, and then if we was to pull it out, there we go. It might just need a little bit of encouragement just to go back in. So there we go, and it should all fit. So now I'm going to take off the tabs, take off the paper. There we go, now it's nice and sticky. So let's slip this through, and I want to make sure I'm going to line up the LED first of all. That's really important. So make sure the LED is on the square, then look for everything else, make sure it's nice and square, and then we can press it down. Look at that. So we can test it out. It says step 1, strike a pose. Step 2, take the picture. Hey, look at that, the LED turns on. And then step 3, see the results. Hey, fantastic. I hope you had as much fun as I did making that project, and I'll catch you next time for another.